Well, we will get started with our lesson in Esther, and we are in chapter 4 this evening. Chapter 4. Before we start to talk about chapter 4, anybody have any questions or comments on the last couple of chapters that we've been looking at?
I thought it was interesting that, when the word went out to kill all the Jews, I think Carol mentioned, she was thinking the soldiers doing it, but then you were saying, no, it's people, get rid of them if they're living next to you.
Right.
And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you don't realize the detail.
Right. I mean, it is really serious stuff, isn't it? And so if you recall, chapter 1, Queen Vashti is disposed, and then Esther is selected as queen. She's told to keep her national identity hidden so that at least people wouldn't know, at least the king and everybody wouldn't know that she is a Jew. What we see is that her cousin that was raising her, Mordecai, was somebody who had position in the king's gate. And so, he had a little bit of access and kind of kept in touch with Esther. And you recall that there was a long period of time in between when Esther was selected to be queen and then as the event started to transpire along. And one of those events was Mordecai discovered a plot against the king's life. And then also Haman was elevated, and so he was placed at a high-level position, and everybody was supposed to honor and respect him, and Mordecai didn't. And the reason why is because Mordecai was a Jew, and Haman was an Agagite. So we talked about what that was, and either he was a direct descendant of King Agag. I was having trouble with that word last week. King Agag, or just simply Haman, even though he didn't have that descended characteristic, he had the characteristics of Agag. And so Agag and the Amalekites were ancient enemies of the Jews and always opposing them, attacking them. Okay, so I think it's more of the fact that he had a direct ancestral link, and you're thinking, okay, well, what is he doing over in Persia, and how do you get promoted? Well, just the same way as the Jew, but instead of like deportation, it could be that he was just there, his family was over there, and everything like that. Okay, so because Mordecai didn't respect Haman, then Haman formed this plot that this edict was going to go out and destroy all the Jews. Okay, and so where we left off, chapter 3, was this edict went out. We see Haman and the king were in the citadel toasting and drinking, but the people of Susa were bewildered about all this, of why is this edict that all the Jews have to be slaughtered? They didn't understand it, okay? All right, so we go into chapter 4, and now we see what the effect is of the edict. And as we look at this chapter is kind of a pivotal chapter of the story. If you look at this as a story goes, you have a little bit of the suspense and the suspense and the suspense, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of like if you're watching a movie and all of a sudden the hero's got his back to the wall, and all of a sudden he comes up, and then things start to turn in his favor. That's kind of what we see in chapter 4 with Esther, Mordecai, and the Jews. Okay? So, chapter 4, in the first 3 verses, it says, when Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because he was clothed in sackcloth, or no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province, to which the edict and the order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Okay, so here is the aftermath of this edict. And what do you think of Mordecai? What do you think of his reaction? He wails, he weeps bitterly, he puts on sackcloth, and he does it very publicly and very openly. What do you think of that?
I think it's interesting because he told Esther to hide her identity, and now he's like very blatantly showing his nationality.
Okay. So you're assuming that Mordecai hid his nationality?
I have a feeling he probably didn't flaunt it. Maybe not necessarily hid it, but didn't flaunt it.
Okay. I kind of have another take on it. I think that Mordecai did, and all the trouble and the opposition that he faced because of it, he didn't want the same for Esther. And that's why he told her to do that. The reason why I say that is because when Mordecai would not bow down or honor Haman, it wasn't just simply he was being a rebel. I mean, he did it just simply because of who Haman was. And so if, in my mind, if somebody is going to have that kind of moxie, they're really not going to, hide who it is. It doesn't, kind of make sense to me to have somebody who's hiding, but all of a sudden, here is somebody who is there, and it, by the way, it's not against the law to bow down and respect Haman, but because of who Haman is, he's like, I'm not doing it. So.
Personal vendetta?
Okay. Who? Mordecai? Of what?
Of not respecting Haman.
Oh, well, I don't know if it's
not necessarily personal, but
it is. It does have to do
ancestral.
with ancestral. Yeah.
I kind of thought when I went and researched a little bit about it, it kind of reminds you of like Hamas right now and Jews. That
Okay.
They just hate each other.
Right.
Especially the Hamas to the Jews. So to me,
Yeah.
it kind of put that back in perspective to give me an idea of why there was so
Yeah.
much.
I can see that, and just the idea of somebody who was being elevated, somebody in Hamas being elevated, and the Jews not recognizing or accepting that sort of honor. I can see that with Mordecai.
But to get back to your question about
Yeah.
what do we think about him doing the sackcloth and ashes, to me it makes me realize how serious this was. I think that's that's why he was doing this, because this is so severe.
Yes. Yeah. Now, do you think that Mordecai was doing this as a form of personal protest?
I thought this was something that they did when they were like mourning or something.
Right.
So
But I mean, the fact that he was doing it publicly.
yeah, it could be.
I mean, I asked that question to, throw out the question. If we go too far down that path, then all of a sudden Mordecai's actions become more of a hypocritical nature, and it'd be somewhat like, back in the COVID lockdown days where some people would have, church services out and about. Sometimes people would do it for the sake and the reason of protesting more so than the sake and the reason of worshiping God, And so maybe there was a little bit of Mordecai going out and abroad to kind of publicize what was going on, but I don't think that he did it in terms of where he crossed the line and he was being hypocritical. I mean, the sackcloth, the mourning, the wailing, all was in reference to God. We're doing this public demonstration before God.
What was the concentration of Jews like around the city center where the King's Gate was?
I don't know.
So I'm wondering if it wasn't a high concentration, the edict wouldn't have affected them as much.
I don't know how many Jews were living in Susa at that time, and I certainly don't know how many of them would have been close to the palace? I'm sure there's estimates, but I don't know. I mean, there would have been quite a few Jews scattered throughout all the Persian Empire at that time, because after all, there were quite a few that were taken to Babylon, and this is 100 plus years after that, and so there were quite a number of Jews that were there.
Just makes me think like maybe he's there like just bringing attention to the effects of the edict. Like if there's not that many people who are going to be personally affected by it in the city center, for him to say, these are my people that are going to get murdered.
Right.
Like
right.
This is what this means.
Yeah. Regardless of why Mordecai went out publicly, what he did not and where he could not go was he could not go past the king's gate. Okay. Now, because he was an official in the palace, he had access to do that. But did you notice where it said that he only went as far as the king's gate because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it? I think it was in our study in Nehemiah. Nobody was supposed to be unhappy before the king, right? And so if somebody's got on sackcloth, that is a form of mourning. And so it's like nobody can enter the palace like that. So that's why he's there. But he's come up to the gate. And so he's gone as far as he can go. And he's pushed the envelope, so to speak. Okay? Okay. So what we see in verses 4 and 5 is we see a little bit of what happens when Esther finds out about it. In verse number 4, it says, when Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned her to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. And so here's Esther. Esther's in the palace. She doesn't know what's going on, right? And so her attendants and the eunuchs that are there tell her about Mordecai. So what that tells me is the people around Esther know the connection between Mordecai and Esther, right? Yeah. And so, we need to understand that although Esther is keeping her being a Jew hidden, there's people who can figure it out because of this connection. Now, what do you think about this? Where it says there in verse number 4 that when she heard about Mordecai, she was in great distress. Why was Esther in distress?
I think maybe she thought all of a sudden he had become super poor or something and couldn't afford clothes, and he was not telling her.
Well, if he was dressed in rags, that would be one thing, but he's dressed in sackcloth, which is very much a symbol of being in mourning.
It's like a who died moment.
Okay.
Like she doesn't really know what's going on outside the palace. So the fact that her father figure is in sackcloth at the city gate.
Okay.
It's in my mind, if I was her, I'd be like, what is going on? Why is he doing this? Like, what has caused him to be here? Like, who died?
Okay. But you notice what she does about it is she sends clothes to him. In other words, don't be like this. So if it's, I mean, I thought that too, okay? If it is a case of, Mordecai's in mourning, there's a problem with Mordecai, we don't know what it is, then you would think that would not be her reaction of, oh, here, have clothes, put on clothes.
Maybe put on clothes so you can come in here and I can talk to you.
Okay.
Figure out.
Well, maybe. The word distressed is also translated in some translation as grieved. It's translated as anguish. It's also translated as fear. Okay? And so Esther is troubled by what is going on with Mordecai. And I think that maybe it's not necessarily the fact that Mordecai is in sackcloth, it's where he is at. Because he's right there at the king's gate. He could be. And if he's in danger, then what about her? Right? Okay. And so here's this eunuch name. Okay, where is he? Where is it? Okay, I went so far as to practice this, so I know it. Okay, Hathash. Okay, so it's too bad you've already settled on the name Lydia, because Hathash, that's another one to put in consideration. Yeah, he is a boy. He's the main eunuch that is there in charge of the queen. And so he is now going to be her errand boy. She's going to be sending Hathash out, first with the clothes and to find out what's going on. And then Mordecai's come back. And throughout the rest of the chapter, with the exception of verse 17, this is really Hathash just relaying back and forth. Okay? All right. And so what happens in verse number 6 is Mordecai is telling Hathash and vis-a-vis Esther what's going on, why he's in mourning. So Hathash went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and to explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence, to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Okay? And so when you look at this, Hathash comes to Mordecai, and Mordecai is giving him really two different things to give Esther. One is the edict, and notice he gives her a copy of the edict. And so, this is proof, right? This is in writing. This is sealed with the king's hand. This is not some conspiracy theory out there. This is what it is. But did you notice that he also goes and tells her the story of what happened, what he did, what Haman did, everything like that? And did you pick up the part about this, about including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay for the destruction of the Jews? How did Mordecai know that?
I thought it was in the edict, but
No, they wouldn't have put that in.
Because the king said, don't worry about the money. Right?
yeah.
Okay.
Just as proof, it was like concrete.
I think that this is something that Mordecai had been hearing. Right? Here's Haman the king talking about things. You know that amongst the palace and everything, there's got to be that water cooler talk, the little office gossip that's going around. And so, Mordecai may have been here. Hey, did you hear that Haman went into the king and promised that he would pay that amount of silver, right? And so then all of a sudden when the edict comes out, everything just it comes together. And, I do think that maybe one reason why Mordecai went through everything that he did so publicly is because, remember, he caused it. I'm not saying he's wrong in causing it. I'm just saying that he was the mitigating factor there. Haman already had the hatred for the Jews. Haman already had this murder that was already in place in his heart for the whole people. But, for the very fact that Mordecai did what he did, that was the trigger mechanism. Okay? So if you put yourself in Mordecai's place, wouldn't you feel just a little bit on the responsible side? Okay. And so maybe that's another reason why Mordecai is there at the king's gate, is because he's wanting to get Esther's attention.
That's true.
Okay?
And the other thing that wouldn't be in the edict that he probably told the eunuch is the king doesn't know it's about the Jews, correct? Because I guess the edict says it's the Jews, but I guess he also had to make sure she knows he doesn't know about this.
Well, he may not know that about that. I mean, the king may in fact, the king may know it's the Jews at this point. I don't know, he doesn't. But, you know, I don't know that Mordecai would know something that the king would not. Okay? All right. But if you notice, what he's after here is go before the king and beg for mercy. Because really, if you think about it, this is their only hope, right? Okay. So what we see following verse number 9 is then Hathach goes back to Esther. Esther then, or Hathach then relays Mordecai's response to her. And we see in verse number 9, it says, Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the golden scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. And so how would you like to have that for a marriage? I can't even approach my husband. And if I do without being summoned, I will be killed. That is a very loving and touching love story, is it not? But I mean, that's the law. And the law is the king is, he's about like a god. And so you cannot approach his inner chambers without being summoned. If you just happen to show up, then the law is you will be put to death. Okay? It's not he can put you to death if he wants to. It is the law is that you will be put to death.
And he can spare you if he wants.
He can spare you if he wants, but the law is that you're going to be put to death. So if he extends the golden scepter and spares you, then that's different. But Esther is saying here, he hasn't called for me for 30 days. So it's kind of like, has Esther fallen out of favor? Has he gotten tired of her? You know, with all of this that's happened with Haman, is that, there's a lot of question marks in her mind. One thing that I want to ask you a question about. At this point, at this juncture in the story, what is Esther's risk assessment of Mordecai's request?
Death. Period.
I can't do it, right? The cost is too high. The risk is too much. The penalty for entering into the king's chamber is death, unless you get spared, but he hasn't summoned me in a long time, and so if I show up, I could very well be put to death. If you think back to Esther's predecessor, Vashti, why was she disposed?
Not doing what the king said.
For disrespecting the king. Entering into his presence without his summons, do you think that could be considered a symbol of disrespect for the king? Especially if he's already still probably a little bit ticked off about the first one, right? Even though that's been years ago. No, she didn't. But she didn't get killed because she didn't break the law. She just didn't do what the king said. Yeah, just made him crankies. And possibly made the situation more critical for Esther. Okay, so in verse number 12, we see, this is Hathach's response to Mordecai about Esther. So now we see Mordecai's response to Esther. And this is, if this is going to be the key passage of the book of Esther, this is it right here. And so in verse number 12, it says, when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to the royal position for such a time as this. That verse right there, that is the quote of the book right there, the key verse. But when we think about this, when we talk about it, we see a little bit about why this is the key passage here, okay? And he's saying that don't think that because you're in the palace, you're going to escape. Now, let's think about this for a second. Has Esther hidden the fact that she's a Jew?
I think
From
so.
some people.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But it can be found out, right?
Well, probably even the little people around her, we think probably already knows.
Probably so, especially Hathach, going and talking to Mordecai. At this point, it's undoubted that Mordecai's a Jew. And he is relaying back and forth personal messages. So, and especially this message right here. So, let's say that Esther sits back and says, I'm not a Jew. It's not going to work. She, even though she's in the king's palace, it is, she is done for. Okay? But did you notice what Mordecai says here? He says that, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. So, does Mordecai believe that God is going to deliver the Jews? And why?
Yes. Because God promised it.
Okay. How did God promise?
In the Old Testament.
Yeah, pretty much the Old Testament. I mean, when you take a look at it, I mean, here we've got the Jews being God's chosen people, right? We've got the promise that's given to Abraham. We have got the promises of the Messiah that's going to be coming from the tribe of Judah. We have got throughout the books of the prophets this idea about a remnant. Okay? And so throughout the prophets, before Babylon conquered them, and even before Assyria conquered, there was always this prophecy that there was going to be a remnant that returned. And that remnant was going to be the race in which God is going to bless the earth, Messiah is going to come, and so on and so forth, right? And so this is all based on God's promise. Now, again, this is something that is really interesting about the book of Esther, because do you read the word God, the name God, in any of this? You do not. But when you read it, do you see him forefront? Yes, you do. Okay? And so Mordecai is saying that because of God's promise, there will be a deliverance from somewhere else. God is not going to allow the destruction of the Jewish race because of his promise. And by the way, that promise is still true today in World War II with Hitler. The reason why he was not able to annihilate them is because of that promise. Iranians and all that wanting to annihilate the Jews, it will not work. It will not happen. The Antichrist is going to come the closest, but at the same time, there is still going to be a remnant that is preserved for Jesus' millennial reign. And so, this is something that is based on God's promise. So Mordecai is believing this, but at the same time, what does he see about his and Esther's picture, his and Esther's future? They won't be part of it. Don't think that. It's interesting that as we look at this, we see a little bit of God's sovereignty and our will. Okay? God's sovereign, and so if he says there's going to be a remnant of the Jews that is going to remain, then that's going to happen, right? Now, Mordecai is saying it could be that God has placed you, Esther, in this position for such a time as this, so that the Jews can be delivered from this destruction. But does Esther have a choice? She does. But if Esther would have chosen to not do it, then guess what? God would have had it all worked out, because God would have known about that choice, and God would have had another, it's not even a plan A or a plan B. It's that, he just has a plan, and his plan is going to work out. It's just that, and the reverse is true with Judas Iscariot, isn't it? And that is, it was prophesied that somebody was going to betray the Messiah. It was Judas Iscariot. But at the same time, Jesus was pleading with Judas to repent at the very end. Okay, so what happens if Judas would have repented? It would have been somebody else. But God knew all of that, and so it's not as if God's sovereign will infringes upon our free will. It's just that God knows everything, and so he has put everything. And so Mordecai doesn't know all of God's plans. He does know that God is sovereign. He does know that God has a plan. And he's thinking, you know what, Esther? It could be that God has put you in this position for such a time as this. You're the instrument. Now, think about this. How long has Esther been in this predicament? Because it really is a predicament.
What?
Being in the palace.
5 years?
5 years. Okay? And so do you think that in those 5 years period, she's thinking, does God have a plan for this? I mean, we don't know, but it makes sense, At the same time, do we sometimes wonder in our life, what is God's plan in all of this? Especially if we're in a difficult situation. Okay, I believe God has a plan for this, but I don't know what it is. Okay? Esther had one of those moments of, hey, this is probably it. I think that's a rarity in the Christian walk. A lot of times our purpose is not insignificant, but our purpose is generalized enough that we don't see it. We see it, right? We see what we should be. We see what we should do, but we don't see, oh, this is me and only me. Or maybe not only me. But, we see something very specific. I think it's a rarity when we see those specific things. Us and God's will more often of the time is just simply the generalized thing, of being the kind of person that we should be, being the kind of Christian that we should be, doing the kinds of things that we should do, and then God using it. The same as what it is with Esther and being specific. It's just that we don't have this is it type thing, right? Sometimes you do see, this is it. And, I think that when it is, it's kind of rare, and so you need to latch on to it. Okay, so what we see is that in verse number 15,
One thing that I have written down for verse 12, where it says, "Do not think because you're in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape." one thing I have written down is do not think because you're in O'Fallon or the Bible Belt or America that you're going to escape persecution. Like just as a application of that. And then
That's true, but can I make a comment before we go on? Is O'Fallon and St. Louis in the Bible Belt?
no.
So we were just having this
it
conversation.
Was slash
We
or
Oh, I thought
Okay.
we were.
you see when Ben was
we're
here,
in
he
a
was
Catholic
talking
pocket
about
of the Bible Belt.
he was talking about it. St. Louis being in the Bible Belt, and being down in Arkansas, I'm like, St. Louis isn't in the Bible Belt.
No, it's not.
So, but maybe it is.
I think compared to other parts of the country, I feel like, yeah, this is the Bible Belt.
Well, that's true. That's true. Mark Twain said that St. Louis was the, or Missouri was the northernmost southern state, the southernmost northern state, the easternmost western state, and the westernmost eastern state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because-
Arkansas. When I lived in Arkansas, you're right. We were northern up here,
Right.
and
It's a little bit of everything, but nothing at all.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
they couldn't
okay.
understand.
Okay, Chloe, what was your second
And then the
comment?
second one was in that quotable verse, and who knows, but that you have come to the royal position for such a time as this. I was like, maybe we've been brought into God's royal family to fight for Him and to stand in times of persecution.
I think we have. I mean, I don't think it may be. I think we have. We are called to be faithful. And
But
being-
things like that, I like trying to take them and apply them to me.
yeah. I mean, really, when when I read that, of who knows, but that you have come to your royal position that for such a time as this, that really does. That really has a big ring to it, doesn't it? I like that verse. Okay. Anybody else have anything before we move on? Okay, we see that this does change Esther's perspective. We see in verse number 15, it says, Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, Go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. I mean, I hate to say it, but Esther's a dead duck either way. And I think that she realizes, I don't have any other option.
That's disappointing
It
to
is.
look at it that way.
No, it is. It
I
is.
looked at it in a very much more optimistic way, but that's very sad.
It is. And, reading, like war stories and soldiers and, things like that, the ones that did heroic things kind of consigned themselves to death before they did it. And, it's just kind of like, I'm in this battle, I'm probably going to die, so I'm going to do what I can.
In Yam, you probably don't even remember this, we were going through Daniel,
Okay?
and you talked about how Daniel was a man of resolve.
Mm-hmm.
He resolved to do the things he was going to do before he did them. And once he resolved to do them, he was going to do them, no matter what.
Yep.
And that's something that since Yam has been on the back of my mind, to be a person of resolve. And I feel like in this case, Esther has resolved to die.
Yes,
I think you're right.
she has. Now she's not saying that she's going to, but she's saying, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, we oftentimes think of death as being the worst thing that could ever happen, but for the child of God, death is not the worst thing that could happen. And death would not have been the worst thing for Esther. Okay? What do you think about what she's saying here? Is 3 days and nights, all the Jews pray and fast for me. Not just me, but what I'm about to do. And at the same time, I and my maids are going to be doing this as well.
I wonder if she has already converted them.
Had an influence on them?
Yes.
I wondered if they were already Jews.
It could be that some of them are.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or they just do what she says.
Or they do what she says, yeah.
I think though from the beginning, everybody really liked her.
Yes.
So I think they will just about do anything she says because I think they just really like her.
I think she is an influential woman. And so I think that she has influence over her maids, whether they're Jews or not.
Right.
It's also their job to do whatever she says.
Well, that's true. She is, after all, the queen. That carries a little bit of weight, doesn't it? Okay. All right. So, verse number 17, Mordecai went away and carried out all Esther's instructions.
What is the significance of 3 in the Bible? Because I feel like a lot of things like fasting and praying and a lot of change of mind happens in 3 days and 3 nights. Or like change of story, change of direction. Like Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights.
Yes, Jesus was
in
on
the tomb 3 days,
3 days
and
and
3
3
nights.
nights.
And I feel like it's a change to like from death to life.
Yeah, I guess we could look at it that regard. I think that a lot of times 3 is a divine number because you have the Trinity. So, 7 is another divine number, but it's a divine number of completion. So, okay. All right. Other comments and questions about this?
I know 40 is the number of like
Another like divine
renewal, like
completion,
wipe out and restart kind of situation.
of a judgment
Yeah.
type thing. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I've enjoyed Esther a lot more than I thought I would. I'm glad we're doing it. I think it's
I
good.
read all of it because I got to this chapter today and I just kept going all the way through.
I like it because it reads like a novel.
It does. It does. That's what I'm saying. Let's take this as a story because it really is. It's good.
It's like a book club.
Yeah, the Friends in Faith Baptist Church Book Club. That's what our Bible study is. Okay. All right. Let's pray. Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for your blessings, and thank you for giving us a plan and a purpose for our lives. Lord, help us to be resolved to carry out that plan and purpose, whether we see its objectives and realize it, or whether we just simply put all these objectives in your hands. Lord, we ask that you would please give us the grace and the strength so that we can do what you want us to do. Please forgive us of our sins, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.